I had this chance encounter with the Taliban, and I became enamored by them.
As teen radicalisation rises, police and experts are seeing neurodivergence more often in the young people being drawn in.
Extremist recruiters are selling a product, so they get very good at knowing where's the target population that's most likely going to buy my product.
We found videos of Australia's most well-known neo-Nazi openly speaking about autistic young men within his movement.
Adolf Hitler, huge autist. I'm telling you, they're a higher race of Aryan.
Neurodivergence isn't a risk.
The vast majority of people who present with ASD do not go on to hold violent or extremist ideological positions.
It is a vulnerability though.
But for this family, they say the push towards extremism when their autistic son was 13 came from the very people they thought were helping him.
We went to the police station not with a criminal, but with our child with disabilities who needed help.
We were all much less safe at the end of it.
It's almost dinner time for this Melbourne family.
Hey, put some soap and take the sponge out for me, please.
Family time is precious because over the last 5 years, one of their sons has spent periods in custody. In 2021, the Australian Federal Police began a covert operation on their 13-year-old autistic son.
Hello everyone, we are on a Unit 4 CKB.
This video was filmed a few years earlier, before he would find himself at the centre of one of Australia's most controversial counter-terrorism cases. Later in court, he became known by the pseudonym Thomas Carrick. But the case was thrown out. A magistrate found that the police operation had groomed and radicalised Thomas, feeding his fixation with extremist material. She said the operation had gone so far that allowing the court case to continue would damage trust in the justice system. Now 18, this is the first time he's agreed to be filmed.
I think I'm finishing this year, year 12, so...
When the family starts talking about what they went through,
everybody left us. Everybody.
Thomas stops eating.
Why you are not eating?
Hey, keep eating.
Thomas's family has agreed to an interview. They say what happened to their son raises serious questions about how police handle neurodiversity in cases like this. But for legal reasons, we can't show their faces. Long before he was charged with terrorism offences, Thomas's parents say years of bullying and isolation had slowly changed their son.
For the other kids, he was different. It was just like a classic schoolyard bullying. Like in the beginning, name shamed, he was excluded. The religious type of bullying started when the kids started calling him a Muslim and a terrorist and Osama bin Laden.
And how did he react to that language?
That language he couldn't understand what it is, and that made him curious, and he started searching. Who are Taliban? Who is Osama?
Thomas began using extremist language. School staff and his psychologists say it appeared to be his way of getting attention, shocking classmates and trying to fit in.
What that did was that pushed away the bullies, and he thought, oh, it's working for me.
Thomas's interest became more concerning, escalating into a fixation on ISIS material. What was it like finding out that your child was looking at this material?
We were shocked, but at the same time we knew that he is not the one who can cause harm. What we were worried or shocked for was that he is very vulnerable. His vulnerability can be exploited.
We started getting that communication from the school about the things that he started doing at school.
In one message, he threatened a student, "If you tell the teacher about this, I will rip your organs out." On another occasion, he sent a student a picture of a decapitated body.
My son's response was very, distressing.
His parents say they sought help from the school, a doctor and a psychologist, but his behaviour kept getting worse.
At one point, he asked for the ingredients for a bomb.
He came back home and he says, "Okay, Mama, I know how you make a bomb." And he was laughing because he was a child,
And when his parents felt like they were out of options.
We went to the police station not with a criminal, but with our child with disabilities who needed help.
They handed over everything, his devices, school reports, psychologist assessments, and details about his autism. They gave authorities complete access to their lives.
We trusted them blindly. Because that was, at that time, when everything else failed, that was our only hope.
At first, the response looked therapeutic. A case manager from Victoria Police became involved. An imam was brought in. A psychologist remained part of the picture. What the family didn't know was that an undercover AFP officer had entered Thomas's life.
My son, he started telling me that I just made few friends online and they are my very good friends and they understand me.
Over 71 days, the AFP communicated with him on 55 of them, sometimes multiple times a day. The conversations would eventually span 1,400 pages.
Did he seem attached to this person?
Oh,
Yeah.
that was the only person in
his life, yeah.
And he got so engaged. He didn't want to lose that person at any cost because that was the only person. I asked my wife, his behavior is like, it's something different. Let's check his computer.
I haven't been able to see all the chats because it's quite distressing for me.
The undercover operation was encouraging him to make a bomb and telling him that he'd make a good suicide bomber or sniper.
It started with our child telling that person, I'm 13-year-old, I have autism. In the other response, he will track him back to the thing. Hey, what do you think that we blow Flinders Street?
In another exchange, Thomas asked whether ISIS had a kids section. He had been directed to overseas attacks and sent information about an 11-year-old who committed murder. Alarmed, his parents called the intervention program that he was in. They thought that they had uncovered another extremist trying to recruit their son. They had no idea they were calling the police about the police.
I couldn't understand, and I said, look, you need to get that person. You don't worry about these things. We will investigate. Leave it to us.
As the online conversations continued, Thomas also sent a photo of himself in his school uniform, holding a knife with the word ISIS written on it. Then during a visit, Victoria Police arrived with presents and a cake to celebrate Thomas's 14th birthday. But days later,
Turned out to be like in a nightmare. They came, they arrested him and he was handcuffed.
Nothing was making sense.
Eventually they found out that Thomas's closest online friend wasn't a friend at all.
What ISIS do is they do the thing that AFP has done in this instant. They groom children, right? ISIS, AFP groom children.
The operation had done more than investigate Thomas. When the case went to court, the magistrate was damning of the AFP's operation on an autistic child and found that they had fed his fixation, groomed him, and given him new boundaries for his fantasy world. She said the police continued the operation despite an internal psychologist seeing his behaviour as an autistic fixation rather than an ideology, and the rehabilitation was doomed when the undercover operation began.
We were in extreme disbelief when we found the extent of what they have done to my son. The worst thing they have done is that they gave him a feeling of belonging. They filled his isolation.
If another parent of an autistic child who was looking at this material came to you and asked you for advice, what would you tell them?
Don't go to police, number one.
Yeah.
Second thing is, take care of yourself. Anyone in our situation will be not but stupid repeating what we have done.
Teen radicalisation has been on the rise for the last few years.
We've got a problem in Australia at the minute. We've seen a spike in similar cases in recent years.
And also in that time, the AFP has identified among those most at risk are kids with neurodiversity. And it's a global trend. Recent figures from the UK government show 1 in 5 referrals to their Prevent Counterterrorism program involved autism. Thomas Carrick's lawyer says the case shows that the AFP used his autism against him.
To intervene in a way that completely plays into that vulnerability, it is incongruous with their position. It was someone who recognised the vulnerability and preyed on it rather than helping him.
One of the counter arguments that people might say is, especially in the context of terrorism, public safety should come first.
I mean, that is of course right, but the reality is you also have to address each individual circumstance, and you need to look at someone like Thomas and say, what's a way in which we can mitigate that? And really what the AFP did was steer him towards attacks. I think the way in which they treated Thomas first and foremost was disgraceful, but I think secondly that it completely undermined his safety and the safety of the community.
We made a number of interview requests to the AFP and sent them an extensive list of questions, and they declined to take part. But in 2024, when questioned about the operation in the Senate, the Deputy Commissioner at the time said that in the same set of circumstances, he'd authorise it again.
It was obviously a decision I didn't take lightly, Senator. The decision to approve the control operation was due to the escalation of threat, the need to protect the community, but at the same time taking into account the age of the individual.
Thomas Sewell is Australia's most well-known neo-Nazi. He's led the NSN, National Socialist Network, also known as White Australia. It's now been officially banned as a hate group, following new laws introduced after the Bondi attacks. But in videos he streamed on various platforms, Sewell openly speaks about autistic people being in his group. We've obtained this video published in 2024, where he jokingly talks about recruiting young autistic men.
I've recruited hundreds of autistic teenagers and 0 of them have stabbed anyone.
In another video we obtained from 2025, Sewell claims that at one point, 1/5 of the NSN was made up of autistic members.
A lot of diagnosed autistic young guys in the group, like back in the day. Not so much these days, there's still a couple, but it was probably 20% back in the day.
He goes on to talk about why he admires them.
We have a completely different perspective of autism. Instead of looking at it as a diagnosis, but instead looking at it as, well, this child has a gift. Adolf Hitler, huge autist, massive autist. You know, like all these incredible men, some of the best men that ever lived. You need to learn to condition their hyperfixation.
Sewell has denied that he's ever actively recruited people with autism.
So I spoke to Thomas Sewell this week and he said that this is not a recruitment video. What do you think it is?
A recruitment video.
Peter Lowe used to be the director of the New South Wales government's Countering Violent Extremism program for young people.
It is a recruitment video, whether he frames it that way for himself or not. What he's offering people is the idea that the thing that is your vulnerability can be a positive here.
I'm telling you, they're a higher race are Aryan, and the system isn't challenging them, the system is coddling them.
The AFP and other experts in this space say that extremist recruiters deliberately look for young, vulnerable people online who they think that they can influence, and that includes people with neurodivergence. How specific is it when a group might be recruiting someone?
Well, they're accessing spaces where they know neurodivergent people are talking to each other about neurodivergence. So there's actual forums where they talk about things like not feeling like they belong, and recruiters will actively go into those forums. They get very good at knowing where's the target population that's most likely going to buy my product.
It kind of makes me sick, to be honest. It really does. The reality is we know that for some people with autism, they do have problems with communication. And there's no point pretending that doesn't happen, because it does.
Nicole Rogerson has spent almost 2 decades at the forefront of autism advocacy in Australia.
Even just thinking like that is unbelievably manipulative, to take a group of young men who may have trouble with social interactions and they might be quite lonely and they might really want to have those social interactions. It would be tragic that they would consider individuals with autism, you know, low-hanging fruit.
So when people say an autistic person might be vulnerable to radicalisation, what specific traits are they talking about here?
Some of the vulnerabilities can be things such as an immense interest or focus on something. It can be a misinterpretation. It can be a literal interpretation.
Hi Michelle, welcome.
Hey.
This uni student in his 20s has always been fascinated by wartime history.
I kind of went through like a gas mask phase just because they look cool.
Trying to leave what he did behind him, he doesn't want to show his face.
This is an American medal, this is from the Soviet Union, this is North Korea, but I also have medals from like Nazi Germany and stuff like that.
He was diagnosed with autism at the age of 10, and because of this, interests became all-consuming.
So you can take a subject that is relatively normal and then you can spend hours and hours and hours researching it, thinking about it, contemplating it, going into it.
His curiosity found him looking into Nazism, the Holocaust, and school shootings.
I would be able to tell you like the name, the date, the places, the people that were involved in it, why it happened. Like I would be able to give you specifics. For me, that's just sort of the baseline understanding of a particular topic.
Then at 16, he decided to turn his attention to how to make a bomb. This is the first time he's spoken about what happened.
I was good at chemistry and electronics. The reason why I opted for an explosive device was because I believed that I would be able to build it to such a standard that I would be able to have control over it.
He built a functional pipe bomb, and wanting to show a girl he knew, carried it onto a bus.
For me, it was about, okay, how as a 16-year-old do I overcome the design challenge of building an explosive device? And so I kind of thought that that would be received well.
But it wasn't. And when she saw the bomb, she became distressed.
And I said sorry to them, and then I came home and I dismantled it, and I was so upset at the situation. And I mean, I knew that I was going to get into a lot of trouble, and so I ended up trying to take my life.
He was later convicted of 4 charges and went to youth detention for a year. In sentencing, the magistrate took into account his autism and said it meant that he didn't understand his actions and had less culpability, but he disagrees with that assessment.
When I saw my friend, I saw her face, I remember understanding completely the consequences of my actions and understanding what I had done was wrong. I think that that is what people get wrong, is that they use autism to strip you of the attribute of understanding what you've done wrong.
Now studying computer science, he still has that instinct to pull things apart and understand them completely, but he's conscious of how that intensity can look from the outside.
An autistic person is manifesting a lot of behaviours that look like radicalisation.
Peter says this is one of the things that played out in the Thomas Carrick case.
He became fascinated by the information, not the ideology, but the information. And the information he knew quite well. That can seem as though that's a real risk, right? And so that special interest can look like an adherence to an ideology.
Hi. Hi, nice to meet you. Forensic psychologist Dr. Katie Seidler assesses violent extremism cases for the courts.
What assumptions should we be careful not to make here?
I think it's unhelpful and it's untrue to suggest that autism spectrum disorder makes somebody more likely to be violent in an extremist way. The vast majority of people who present with ASD do not go on to hold violent or extremist ideological positions. It's often the perfect storm of events and risks that come together to catalyse that person.
Court documents show Thomas was known to authorities the year before his parents went to the police for help and the Covert Operation began.
I don't feel like there was intervention early enough. I mean, his parents had raised concerns from about the age of 10. There should be some way of diversion before prosecution when we understand that there are some extenuating vulnerabilities. And we have a few options, but they're all government-led.
Peter is in the process of bringing a model to Australia, where NGOs can support families before things escalate and require police intervention. Mubin Sheikh once believed violent jihad was the way forward. When September 11 happened, he celebrated.
After that attack happened, I realized that, this is not right. This is not good. I realized that, how did I come to a place where, the group that I supported, this is what they produced.
From his home in Toronto, Canada, he spends a lot of his time on calls like this one.
This is probably the most important time in custody.
All eyes are on him.
All eyes, and we want to make sure everything goes smoothly.
Mubin works for a program called Parents for Peace, which is independent from the police and government and uses former extremists like him. Australia has no program like this.
I had gone to the remote areas of Pakistan. I had this chance encounter with the Taliban while I was there, and I became enamored by them.
This life experience is what he says makes the program more effective.
They're probably trying to figure out, why should I believe this guy? I just hold up my phone and show them that photo, and I'm telling you 90% of my work is already done. So we're arm's length from government. That's the most important thing.
Mubin says what makes his program so successful is that parents of children involved in extremism are more likely to come forward.
Parents are obviously mortified to even consider the option of, do I call the police on my child? Because what do police do? Police come and they arrest, and then your kid's gonna go to prison.
When a court found that 13-year-old Thomas Carrick was groomed by the AFP, his case was thrown out, but it wouldn't be his last encounter with the law.
Your son was charged again. Can you tell me what happened?
Okay, so what he did was he wrote a threatening email to one of the synagogue in Melbourne.
When Thomas was 17, he posted ISIS material on Instagram and wrote an email to the Melbourne Hebrew congregation saying that there would be a shooter at the synagogue and that they would burn and slaughter Jewish people. Unlike the first case, he pleaded guilty to terror-related offences and spent a year in youth detention. But his parents still blame the AFP for intensifying his extremism.
Yes, he must be held accountable for his wrongdoings, but what made him to bring here, is that not a questionable thing?
Knowing everything that's happened and where your son is at and how he responds to trauma and what he's been through, are you worried that he'll offend again?
No.
We are trying to provide all the supports, the therapeutic supports to him, and we are very hopeful that no, he won't do it again.
He won't do anything. One of the realization by us, we are not keeping toxic people around him. We want the best for him without any trust or expectation from the authorities.
But Thomas Carrick's parents want more change and understanding of autism by authorities and are suing the AFP for age and disability discrimination. In a statement, Victoria Police said it remains committed to public safety and runs early intervention programs for people assessed as vulnerable to violent extremism. And support can include mentors, counselling, education, or job opportunities.
No other child should face the same things. They just left us with a much tougher job. But we as a parents, we will not give up, and we will not lose our hope, and we will try our best to get him out of it.
What do you want for your son now?
Michelle, what I want from my son is the same what I wanted in 2021. I want him to live a good and normal life ahead.